kicked the gravel cut up and hit the car, and that's the closest.
So. The ARPA money,
with some of it.
some of, how much of it?
33 million. So I didn't bother.
Not
I think,
divide-
are you're the vice chair, right?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
And so that's gonna be divided by 22 municipalities?
We haven't heard from John at all.
I have it.
well, of
Oh, it is
course I didn't check
7:30.
my phone. All right, well, we'll go for
Yeah.
it.
Go for it.
All right, I will bring this deliberative meeting to order at 7:30 a.m. Friday, December 2nd, 2022. First item is Luker Revocable Trust.
They both
Neon
come.
Luker Revocable Trust,
Go ahead, keep going. You start.
west of 2712 Nakaima Avenue, Town of Black Wolf, zoning map amendment. Need a motion and a second to bring it to the floor.
I'll make a motion to go ahead and bring it to the floor.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none.
I do have the post staff
Yeah.
report, so whenever you guys
go
are
right
ready.
ahead.
So our applicable ordinance is chapter 23. The following findings have been made in accordance with section 23.7-114. The town of Black Wolf has approved. Town action is advisory due to shoreline jurisdiction. Town findings were as follows. Town has an adopted land use plan. The action agrees with the town adopted town plan. And town has adopted land use plan. Action agrees with town adopted land use plan. There were no objections and our recommendation is for approval.
Ask one more time. Does anybody have anything to say on the Luker Revocable Trust item? Take a vote. All those in favor?
I,
Opposed? None?
Thank you. They actually get here because my niece had a parade last night. I was actually hungry this morning. Item number 2, Steve D. Marcel, east of 9691 Walsh Road, Town of Poygan, special exception.
So for our special exception, the post staff report. The town recommendation, the town of Poygan stated that the proposed request is not allowed under their zoning ordinance. Our preliminary findings were proposed special exception meets ordinance requirements allowing an accessory use on a vacant lot. Proposed special exception meets the intent of section 23.8-45, establishment of an accessory land use prior to an establishment of a principal use, and section 23.7-214, basis of decision in totality. Our recommendation is for approval with the following conditions. Our conditions are tax parcel 0200670 shall be deed restricted to the tax parcel 0200671 for the lifetime of the proposed garage. Number 2, deed restrictions shall be recorded with the Register of Deeds prior to any issuance of any permits.
I'll make a motion to approve the special exception.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the item? Seeing any, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is a final plat which was adjourned from last month's deliberative because there was no response from the town. We still didn't get a response, but I did look up their minutes, and at their April 25th, 2022 meeting, they decided to take no action because the proposed plat is entirely within shoreline jurisdiction.
Make motion to approve it. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I have a feeling we may have discussion on this one.
We will.
Okay.
I communicated with the town and they said that they were going to be getting in contact with you. Now, whether they did or not, I don't know. They do have some discussion. The reason that they did, I happened to be at that meeting, and the reason that they did not take action is that nobody knew what it was about. If you look at, we've been I've been told that it's a land division. And land divisions are supposed to go through the town. If you look at this second addendum, which is just this map, when you read through the legal description, all they're describing is the outline of this property. The legal description doesn't take into account these three individual parcels within that. That's not part of the legal description. So are those parcels really there if they're not included in the legal description? And I'm trying to figure out what this really does. There's a little paragraph here in the middle of the map which lists three different parcels. Only the first two are on the GIS map. I don't know what the third parcel is. I would assume it's where Unit C is going to go. When you look at the GIS map, it lists those first two parcels and includes only the buildings with them. And if you look at that tax parcel, the tax ID for those two, they include only the building and no land, which, you know, I would assume to be the way it is for a planned development district. I don't know what this third parcel is that's listed on the map. I've compared this with other planned development districts because I'm still trying to learn about this. I looked at a planned development district that's in the town of Winchester. And there, those parcels include land with it. Okay. I also looked at one, I think it's in the town of Oshkosh. It's along the north shore of Butamore. I found that very interesting because when you look at those land, the GIS map shows land associated with those tax parcels. But when you actually go to the tax bill, they list it as 0 acreage, but they have an assessment for land. Admittedly, I'm a little bit confused as to what's, you know, I don't see a lot of consistency with these planned development districts. Okay. I was kind of hoping this would get sorted out at the town level because I believe land divisions should be done at the town level. So I'm going to be voting against this.
Well, if I can take a quick stab at it before someone from staff
Okay.
gets on there, just want to explain that they're platting the land out and they have the parcels here. It's not, this doesn't actually look to me like an actual subdivision. This looks to be just like they're platting it out and they're saying this is where these properties are. It's like when you get a plan for like 50.
Yeah.
And they say, here's where the properties are. And that's where the lines end up being for the properties. It seems to me that I've seen this again and again with the
Okay.
larger developments where like you have west of Oshkosh that we've had when I was on the city staff, and it seemed like they always had, yeah, it was very similar to what we have going on here. Am I incorrect on that?
Nope.
So then shouldn't these parcels, shouldn't there be a certified survey map for these parcels? And is that where the legal description is? And
Yes.
isn't that part of,
It's not a CSM, it's a, This was an existing PDD that was done back in, I forget the year. At the time that they did it, they didn't convey land. All they did was convey building area, which were these units. Now they're coming back and they're conveying land. So we have to treat that like a subdivision. Even though it's a PDD, because of the language in our ordinance, we had to treat it like a subdivision. That's why this process has taken place. And I want to point out, and I'm sure nobody's aware of this. When you approve the preliminary plat, which this committee did, I believe in April. Once they submit a final plat that conforms to the previously approved preliminary plat, we have 60 days to approve it or deny it. Actually, not even deny it. We have 60 days to approve it. If this committee doesn't approve it, it automatically is approved because the final plat is consistent with the preliminary plat that we have already approved.
This is an unusual one, right? Because
It is.
normally,
But then why aren't these individual things included with the addendum?
I don't understand the question.
Well, there are 3 parcels listed here on this CSM. 2 of them show up on the GIS map. I don't know what the third one is. If that is part of this, that should be part of this.
The GIS map has no influence on the approval of this final plat. Doesn't matter what the GIS shows. This is a different map than what is on the current GIS.
I don't know what these 3 parcels are that are listed on here. Is there a legal description on
Yes,
this?
and the GIS department and the tax listers department has approved what is being proposed. So the GIS department approves that the puzzle, so to speak, matches. The property listers department verifies that the legal description is accurate. And both of those departments have approved this.
Well, I don't know what, and maybe that is on there. But then it should be included with this package, because this package is incomplete. Because I don't know what that description is. It doesn't say that here.
Trying to find a way to.
Is there
explain
a legal description? I'm sorry. Sorry.
it. Well, when you have subdivisions like this, where you have the whole property and then they're breaking it into subdivisions. It's mapped on here what unit C is, it's mapped on here, it shows on here what unit B is, it shows on here what unit A is. It doesn't describe those because they're subdivisions. This is, like I said, I've seen dozens of these come through on the larger scale. They don't sit and they don't describe every single property on a subdivision. That's why it's a plat map. I believe that's the difference with a plat map,
Yes.
is that the plat map is showing you where everything is, but not describing everything to you. Whereas your CSM would actually have to would have your description of everything and showing you everything that's on there. So that's why we're approving. This plat map was approved, and we're approving a plat map. We're not approving a CSM right now. Correct?
That's correct.
Does that kind of? 'Cause it's a subdivision thing, isn't, I believe, with when you have dealing with plat maps instead of CSMs.
Right.
And I think you guys kind of get now. Am I kind of in the neighborhood where I'm going with this? Because maybe they can add some more detail.
This isn't the full file. There's a second page to every plat that contains the entire legal description of everything that's being shown here. Once the property listers department approves that, I'm confident that the legal description is 100% correct. Because that's what they do. GIS department has approved this. They make sure that what is being described, that the puzzle is complete with no errors. And both of those departments have approved.
If that is true, I'm very confident it's right, because anyone that has anything to do with the tax collector should know that it's gonna go through them, and she's
Every
very
inch
thorough.
matters.
Yeah. She's not gonna approve something that isn't. But this is unusual in the fact that this land that these homes are on was not owned by them, right? It
That's
was,
correct.
and so that's what I meant by unusual.
It is. When it was done, there was no property owned by the individuals that own the buildings.
Correct. That's what we saw. We were
Yes.
told when we first went and
Right.
viewed this.
Now, they will own the land
Mhm.
shown on these boundaries.
Under the same parcel number that their home is owned on. right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
To make it clean.
yes.
Okay, Sean.
So can I ask a question of you? Would a CSM make this cleaner?
No, because it's a PDD. So it had to be treated like a subdivision because it was an existing PDD.
Thank you.
And to your question, the legal description of a CSM would be exactly the same as the legal description for what's being done here. Assuming the same boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
And where is the legal description for these individual parcels?
It's on the second page and we never send the second page because it's the committee, the previous committee didn't need the second page. The second page is what the tax lister combs through. And she has approved that the legal description on the second page of the proposed plat is okay.
So can I ask, so Howard, what is your overall concerns then? After, I mean, you've done a lot of research. This is in your township, right?
No,
No, it's not. Okay.
No.
So,
well, I still have a concern.
or thoughts or,
Yeah. I guess I don't. I guess I'm surprised that we don't get the complete document. You know, I looked at this and I said, there's no legal description for it. You know, how can I approve something I can't see? You know, so. And I also believe that, you know, and maybe this isn't considered a land division. I don't know.
It is a land division. That's why we're reviewing it.
Okay.
And the
And I
property
believe,
lister has approved of the legal description of what's being proposed.
okay. And I think land divisions need to go through the town. Because
The
they're,
town has their own subdivision ordinance. And based on their minutes, if they didn't have enough information, then they should have contacted the individual or the department that submitted the initial information to them. I
Yeah.
can't, you know, I can't keep calling a town and begging them for some sort of response. Their response was, it's shoreland, we don't understand it, we're not gonna take a position. If they determine that based on lack of information or confusion of what was being proposed, then they should have contacted the entity that they submitted the material to the town.
And that's kind of, I'm just gonna bring this up. That's kind of like the one that we approved there in Poiget. The town was against that, but we approved it.
Yeah.
So, so now this one here, whether they were against it or for it, either way, it's still up to us whether to do it because it's in shoreline. So, and I know where you're coming from very well, but it's still gonna fall back on the committee, whatever happens.
Exactly, and I would add to that, we've given them more than ample opportunity to get more feedback from them on this, and they just said, we don't want to decide on this, it's your decision to make.
Mhm.
And you can only lead the horse to the trough. Any other questions or discussion? Once, twice. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. But any opposed?
Yes, opposed.
Passes 4-1.
I move for German as a deliberative meeting.
Second.
Made second, all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I understand where you were coming from very much so.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You just wanted to see where it was and it would have, but I guess it's something we never.
Recording. All right, I will call the planning and zoning committee meeting for Friday, December 2nd to order. What up? Item number 1, approval of minutes from September 27th, public hearing, October 7th, deliberative, October 7th, planning meeting, October 21st, viewing, October 25th, public hearing, November 4th, deliberative, and November 11th, 2022, viewing.
I move for the above
Second.
mentioned hearings all to be
Moved and
approved.
seconded. Any additions, deletions, corrections? And not seeing any. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 2, report on chapter 24, Whitman Regional Airport zoning ordinance amendments and potential committee action to forward amendment application for chapter 24 to January public hearing.
Introduce this. We have Stephanie Ward from Mead and Hunt. They work with the city of Oshkosh on in the county airport on revising the airport overlay zoning code. And it has recently been approved by the aviation committee. And now it's sent on to this committee. Our office enforces this ordinance. And as part of that, we need to go through the public hearing process to amend the what is chapter 24, the airport overlay zoning ordinance. And we thought it's best that this committee, and I know John and Mary Beth, you both have, seen this presentation a few times, a couple times already. We had a public informational meeting for the general public back in October. There was some attendance from the public, but we invited all the residents that are potentially affected by this ordinance. And, we had a rather small crowd, but that was a very useful meeting as well. We have Cameron Hellick from the airport here and Mark Lyons from the city of Oshkosh as well. They both were very instrumental in updating this ordinance. So here we are. We have Stephanie. She'll do a presentation virtually. I do have a hard copy for you, the committee, on essentially what she's going to present, but she'll do it in a much more summarized version than the study. So just grab one, pass around.
I don't need one.
Yeah,
I've got a couple.
I assumed
I have a
that,
couple of them.
you know, Mary Beth and John, you guys.
We're on overload.
Yeah. And I also have a copy
Sorry.
of the proposed new chapter 24, so you can grab one, Howie, if you don't mind. And this is the rewritten version that would go to public hearing potentially in January. So there should be enough for each of the committee members. So and also I do have a map of the new overlay, which is actually, I should say, it's actually in the ordinance here. So you'll see that in there anyway. So I guess I don't know if you gentlemen have anything to say at this point, otherwise we'll turn it over to Stephanie.
I guess I have a question right away.
Oh, sure.
On what we're going to see, what's actually going to be changed. Then I can.
Yeah,
You'll see in the presentation.
yeah, she'll go over some of
She does it
that.
really well, covers it really well. There we go.
All right, well, good morning.
Morning.
Apologize, I would be sharing my screen, but, or my personal video, but I had one of those fantastic Zoom reboots this morning that's now not talking to my camera. So I'm trying to share my screen, but it says I've been disabled. Could somebody allow me to share my screen? Thank you. All right. Can you see me now?
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, I caught just the tail end of your other meeting, and I wanted to say that I appreciated that because I often think about, airports having an awful lot of acronyms. You guys threw around a whole bunch of them that I was unable to follow. So that made me feel a little bit better that, there's other industries that aren't just airports that have too many acronyms. So I'm going to walk through very briefly, as the introductory comments stated, the additional detail is in the report that's been provided to you, and I'm just going to try to hit the high level elements for you and then answer any questions that you might have. So the update that we're looking at doing is taking a look at your current ordinance that was developed back in 2012. So, basically a decade has passed. That's actually a pretty good time to look back and see, how have things changed? What challenges have we had in terms of administering the ordinance as it was put in place? And we're still focused though on the 4 key tenets that govern why it was adopted to begin with, and that we're trying to make sure that we create a compatible relationship between what's happening at the airport and what's happening on the properties near the airport. We're trying to create that awareness of that there are airport operations that happen in that area. We're trying to make sure that we protect the airspace from any obstructions that are going to penetrate up into the area where aircraft are going to be operating. And then we're also trying to make sure that we can protect the investment that's happened both at the airport as well as those around the airport. So those goals have not changed in terms of making sure that we're protecting for the public health, safety, and welfare. The ordinance itself, the original as well as the update here, are both still governed by Wisconsin statute 135 and 136. And you see the titles are very similar. One just talks about in general, and then one gets into the approach itself, which is the airspace side of the house. That's a really, for those who may not be aware, is a very sought after ordinance that, or I guess statute, I should say, at the state level. I do a lot of work nationally, and Wisconsin is often looked upon as a leader from the standpoint of the statute that was established that allows an airport owner the ability to do extraterritorial zoning out to 3 miles around an airport. There are not that opportunity in many other states where airports have the ability to go out and do that. So I just point that out because it's fairly uncommon to have that ability to do that, which is great for a practitioner trying to protect the airport. So this graphic gives you a quick visual representation of where we sit today. So the existing ordinance today has 6 different districts that are affiliated with the zoning ordinance. 5 of those are related to land use protections. And then the 6th district, Air 6, is the one that looks specifically at height limitations. So those different zones, which I know it's probably hard to pick up in the graphic, but you can see their different color codes. The challenge that's really been before the county and the city in terms of administering this is there's a lot of overlap. And we also get a lot of surfaces where we've got some restrictive use. See there in the note under the outer approach departure zone. That surface itself is farther away from the airport, but is actually more restrictive in its definition of the uses than one of the surfaces that's closer. And so those were some of the things that we were evaluating as we went through the analysis of the existing ordinance to look at how could we make it better. So this graphic takes those existing zones that exist today. So you can see them in the greens and blues and the orange, and looks at it through the lens of what the airport is expected to have some regulatory ability to control as it relates to airspace. And so that's where you see some of these additional services, basically everything that's in this lighter pink color, both extending out from the approaches of the runways, as well as these concentric circles or ovals around the airport. So we felt that was important because, again, keeping in mind the fact that the underlying goal here is making sure that the airport is protected through state statute. We wanted to make sure that we looked at how did those two compare. So with that in mind, we looked at both height limitations and area around the airport, and then we were comparing it back to the existing ordinance. So this graphic gives you a very high level summary. We went through and picked out some of the types of land uses that are currently governed under the existing ordinance and compared it to those, in particular, 5 land use zones, and looked at what is currently allowed or not allowed. And you can see an awful lot of X's in that table. Those X's indicate the land uses that are currently prohibited in those different zones. You can see a lot of X's. So there isn't a lot of flexibility at either the county level or the city level in terms of the administration right now, because those things are just flat out not allowed. And that's caused some challenges for the administration of the ordinance over the past few years, because some of these things, if done with some mitigation, with some site plan review, are really something that we felt could have been allowed to be developed. So that's part of our goal, and the update was to look at how can we provide a little bit more flexibility with still not giving up any of the goals in terms of keeping the airport and the residents near the airport adequately protected. So what we looked at then, when we looked at what the existing surfaces are and where they are relative to things that we need for the airport perspective, what some of the challenges have been in the administration, we really came up with 4 recommendations. One was to consolidate the zones where appropriate so that we didn't have some of that overlap, and it made it a little easier to administer. We also looked at the term of places of assembly. That term in the existing ordinance has a very broad definition, and was really creating some challenges that a type of use that might have more people in it compared to the use of a different, say, commercial description, they were really being treated differently, even though they were very similar. So I'll cover that in a little more detail in a moment. We also looked at how do we create or update the zoning code so that we protect against uses that would worsen a situation, so if we've got some transitionals of uses, and then some of these ambiguities that we found in terms of tie-ins with the existing ordinance. So I'll show you those in just a moment. So what that resulted in, to address a couple of those in terms of tightening up the areas and reducing some of the ambiguity, was instead of having 6 districts, we're proposing that it go down to 4. 3 that are land use related and 1 that is height related. We would look at extending the Air 2 zone, which is this approach surface, the area you see in green, to better accommodate the Part 77 surface. So that's an area that FAA is very interested in the airport, because that's where we get a lot of the activity coming into and out of the runways. In the old ordinance, that surface did not extend to the north up towards the city. It was truncated at 20th Avenue. And so that was a real challenge when we looked at it compared to the old one, that this area really is an important approach and departure surface to the airport, and it was basically being ignored in the old ordinance. So we've looked at extending that. And then Air 3, which was all the area that was in the first graphic in orange that kind of circles the airport, we're proposing to reduce that because that is area that really only the smaller aircraft use. That's what we call using the traffic pattern. So where they're usually flying in a rectangular manner as they're approaching or landing into the airport. And because it's usually smaller aircraft they're using that, we mapped and talked with the tower about where that area actually is. And so we're proposing to bring that area farther in. I'll show you a comparison graphic here in just a moment. So that's the main focus of changing that up. We've reduced some of the area and also extended the area in some cases. So overall, the physical amount of land encumbered over the ordinance or as a part of the ordinance stays pretty similar to where we were. We're just taking some out and putting some in. We also, as I mentioned, the Air District, which was the old Air 6, we proposed that this become the new Air 4 district. This graphic, I do not have an update for you yet, but what we're proposing here is that as a part of the current airport master plan update that the airport is going through, that we will make this graphic digital, so we'll develop it in a GIS format, and it'll have what we call a more fluid flow to it. We'll walk away from the grid pattern that's currently used. So you can see here in some of these spots, larger areas that were assigned an allowable elevation that may cover 40, 80, 100 plus acres in one area. And all of that's being treated the same. What the new map will do would be to treat that in a progressive manner. So, the closer to the runway environment you are, the lower the allowable height, that as you go farther away, that'll increase in height. And so that will give us more flexibility in some of these outer areas to actually work with a parcel and provide additional buildable height than what they would have under today's ordinance. So that'll be something that is going to be developed here over the next few months as a part of the next part of the ALP and the master plan. So I mentioned a comparison. So this gives you an idea looking at those districts. So the gray scale that you see is the old 2012 or the existing 2012 version. And the colored is the new 2022 version. So where you can see this is the yellow. You can see the yellow area extended farther in several cases, especially to the north, to pick up those approach surfaces. And then the difference, you can see the gray outline here to the east and the west of the primary runway. We've brought that further in. So instead of having all of this area to the east and the west, we're recommending that that be pulled into this area that is in the green instead. So we would have the blue area, which would be our Air 1. So that's predominantly on airport property already. That's the areas that FAA is very concerned about, making sure we have clear of all obstructions, because that's where we see the most incidents of aircraft activity. Then we'd have the approach areas that are extending out, and that's where we've got aircraft coming and going during takeoff and landing. And then we've got the green area, which is much more about where the surfaces are in terms of those overflights as aircraft are doing maneuvers around the airport. So one of the things, how we're looking to make that issue of it being a little easier to implement, is we're looking at taking a number of the uses that were previously prohibited and instead making them a conditional use, where they would go through a conditional use review process. So it's not saying that they're absolutely going to be approved. It's going to say we're going to consider them under a conditional use scenario. And some of the criteria that we'd be looking at is shared here. So we'd be looking at what's the number of people or the density of people in the facility. How long is it going to be occupied? Is there a quick turnover of customers if we're thinking about it from a commercial standpoint? Are there height concerns that might be affiliated with it? So that ties into our Air 6 district. And then we've got the last four that you see on the list there. Those are the things that are usually what we consider more ancillary land use concerns, where is the land use going to create something that creates a wildlife attractant? So bodies of water or waste management issues, refuse that's left out. Visual obstructions, are they going to generate something that's going to create smoke, steam, glare, that sort of thing that might impact a pilot's ability to see when they're landing or taking off? or something that creates electrical interference, or then the last one is one that really kind of flips the impact is, is it a type of land use that's going to be impacted by noise that's generated by the aircraft? So something that's in the overflight areas. And so by looking at those criteria, what we're going to be able to discuss is that, if a land use proposal comes in a certain area, if those different things can be mitigated or managed, then we might be in a position to approve it, where previously it was just a straight out denial. So a good example of that might be something that comes in with a noise concern. If it's something that had a noise concern, one of the mitigation measures might be, well, if they can install additional insulation or more noise attenuating windows or doors, that might make that proposal more palatable to everybody, and then it might be able to be approved. So that's going to give some flexibility. We've talked to the administrators here of the code to see if that's going to be something that they're willing to administer, and the general consensus seemed to be yes, that would be something that they'd be willing to do, so that we do create some of that flexibility and give us that ability to hopefully say yes to a few more things and manage it better. So here's kind of a summary of, again, just kind of highlighting a few of the different types of land uses and how that might compare. You can see that, the number of X's has been greatly reduced, and that's somewhat because we've reduced it to only 3 zones instead of the 5 that we had before. So the Air 1, again, because that's predominantly the stuff that's on airport, unless it's aviation or agricultural, for the most part, we're not seeing any development in that area. But when we jump out to the Air 2 and the Air 3, you'll see an awful lot of them that have a C or an A, which the nomenclature for that is either a conditional use. So if we work through the conditional use approval and find that, yes, it can be mitigated, then it's going to be approved, or it depends on the underlying zoning. So it's something that as a general rule, the airport could live with, but it's going to be dependent upon what, your local zoning in addition to that plays out. So Mark, I don't know if you want to real quick just kind of talk about the Ninja Gym example, because I think that one just, kind of captures all of it best.
That's my favorite example. So just kind of show some of the discrepancies in the existing code. Right now, because the existing code uses that term place of assembly as its metric, how everything is decided. Right now there's areas in the airport that someone could put in a 10,000 person call center. Now I'm using an extreme example to make a point, but you can put 10,000 people from 8 to 5 all day, every day. In that same area, you couldn't put a 10-person ninja training gym, like the Ninja Warrior stuff. We had one that was requested going in the city that the maximum occupancy of the building was 10 people. That couldn't go in, but that same property could have 10,000 people all day long, because one is defined as a place of assembly and one is defined as an office. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense that one of those would be permitted and have a lot more people. And if there was a aircraft incident, you don't want that many people in a building at one time that close to the airport. But 10 people you could. So the goal of this update was really to look at those type of examples and say, okay, what is really reasonable? What could be mitigated through looking at the metrics of a specific use and decide if it really makes sense or not.
So that's one of the significant pieces, and quite honestly, I think drove some of the reason for taking a look and updating the ordinance. So one of the things that certainly came up as a question, and especially as we look to the north by adding in the additional area that we did in the Air 3 district, was what does this mean for property owners, and in particular for the residential properties. All of the existing properties are allowed to be maintained. We're not creating any sort of non-conforming designation with that. We would be allowing for infill development, so that's specifically called out in the ordinance language itself, that we have a number of vacant lots that are up there to the north in particular, that if someone were to come in and purchase one of those properties, or an existing owner say, well, I'm ready to build on it, that would be allowed. That we're really one more house up in that area. We're not making the situation any worse. They would still be held to the Air 4 district, which would be the height limitation. So, we couldn't have somebody building a 6-story house in that area. your existing underlying zoning wouldn't allow for that anyway. And then we're also identifying that any renovations, reconstructions, et cetera, that would be subject to normal zoning requirements. So what we're really focused on though is that last bullet is that, let's say that a developer came in and decided to buy up several blocks in that north approach area and do a redevelopment. That is where we're going to start to get concerned about what could that reuse be. So that would then come under the purview of that conditional use that we'd be looking at. Is that changing the character, the nature, et cetera, such that it would be more incompatible than what we have today? And so that would give us the flexibility to do that. And then as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, all other properties though, we would be, with the exception of the ones that are just outright prohibited, the vast majority of those being, in the Air 1 district, would be subject then to that conditional use or be allowed outright, and gives us more flexibility with those site plans. So, some of the few things that are really prohibited are going to be schools or hospitals, and those things in any of those 3 districts are really just, I'll say too close to the airport, where should an accident happen, they're rare in aviation, but when they do, it can be catastrophic. And so we really do want to keep uses where we've got people who are have limited mobility, for example, in a hospital. We really don't want those types of facilities in those districts. And so some of those are some of the few things that we've actually shown to actually be prohibited. So that's really the highlights. I can go into any more detail that you would or would not like. I know that several of you have already sat through this several times, so you probably don't want to hear it yet again. I think you got a couple more still coming right through the adoption process, but happy to answer any questions that you might have. And even if you have a chance to review the document that's been put before you, if you've got questions later on, happy to answer questions once you have time to review it.
I have been through this a couple times, and I saved a question for this particular meeting.
Uh-oh.
Because the right people in the room to answer this question. Speaking on this conditional use at the last part of this, how hand tight are we? Like we normally are with conditional use permits, with the conditional uses for this.
So we had that in mind, which is why we established criteria for it. Because if you know in the state law change, when it comes to conditional use permits, you have to have measurable, quantifiable standards in your conditional use permit. So we put them in this ordinance with that in mind. That's why she went through that list of
Right.
number of people, all of those things. That's our measurable, definable criteria to give us the flexibility to deny a conditional use permit when appropriate. If it's a large density development that has wildlife attractant and noise, we can deny it. We have the criteria in the ordinance.
I should also point out that a conditional use is an allowed use. You can't just deny it outright. The reason it's listed there is it's an allowed use. So if one just doesn't like it, you can't deny it. You have to use those criteria. to deny
Right,
it.
but that is why I was asking, because of the fact that we've,
Right.
I've obviously dealt with it at the city level and now at the county level, where conditional use permits are difficult sometimes. And I just wanted that explained a little better, so that way I understood it clear, and obviously everybody else here who we've had these issues before as well understands that.
Yeah, if you deny it, you want to have, facts,
Right.
not this might happen, that might happen. You need to have established facts to deny a conditional use.
And the fact that that's all baked into the cake, so to speak,
Right.
makes it that much easier for us when they come to us. So.
That was my question. Will it be coming to us or will it be coming to the city?
It's.
It depends what the area.
Presently administered, and if I'm wrong here, type it. And if they're in the county, they would go through the county. If they're in the city, they would go through the city.
Yeah, that is the understanding. I think that's incorporated in the ordinance. I believe the language. Except for variances.
Correct. Height is all through the county.
Yeah.
So Mark, since I've been at this like 4 times now. So city versus county, towns, whatever, we're all trying to work as good neighbors here. And this did need cleanup. So if somebody comes to you for something in the city, what is the protection for the county airport that you'll say nay or yay.
So the improvement of this ordinance
Mhm.
is bringing the airport much further into the process. Right now, in the current ordinance, they're not really involved in the process.
Mhm.
The goal of this ordinance by establishing those criteria is to have them being really weighing in to protect the airport and being able to have that involvement with them and say, hey, working like this, our industry believes, this is going to be an issue. We don't want it to be. Here's the criteria of why we don't think it works. We would like it denied.
So
this
there'll
should
be
really improve that.
communication now.
Yep.
More so between city, airport, county perhaps. Both entities will have a kick at the cat.
Yep, we brought the airport in early and we said, if we're gonna do this, we need to better manage it together.
That's-
Because really, it's their ordinance, it's their protection. Our first goal when we decided we were gonna try to figure this thing out was no matter what, we had to protect them first. Then look at how can we make the ordinance a little bit more flexible, a little bit more benefit to the community. But none of it was gonna work if we couldn't protect the airport first.
But still allow for development,
Yep.
either in county or in the city, as all good neighbors.
Correct. If this would give some flexibility, now it's gonna put a little more work on the staff level, because we're gonna have to look at these conditional uses, figure out if it makes sense. But at least it provides an opportunity that in the current ordinance just doesn't exist.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Stephanie did, as usual, a great job again.
Thank you.
Just make things easy to understand the way you explain them, and that goes a long way to some things like this. I think the lack of questions says a lot to the how well you did.
Well, thank you. Well, I, did 9 years on your side of the table as a planning commissioner, so I try to channel that when I'm presenting of.
That explains it.
One quick question for you, Stephanie. Would you be doing a presentation or open to doing a presentation to the county board?
Absolutely.
However that goes down. Thank you.
And one note that we didn't mention, I just want to bring up, this was reviewed by the State Aviation Board of Aeronautics, and they did recommend their approval of it. So we wanted to make sure we didn't go this far without getting their approval first.
Just curious with that said, Mark, is this different than other communities? Are we like, is this we're doing something different than other communities have done, or we're following suit? And
The typical process, Appleton with their airport has an overlay district similar to this. But no, the typical process is you want to reach out to the Bureau of Aeronautics first, because if they're not going to be okay with your ordinance,
Right.
you're dead in the water. So we started with them first to make sure we weren't, violating any of the state law issues, make sure they were on board with it.
that's good to know for when it does come to the board. If people have, for some reason, any questions or whatnot, we can add that in there, that this is what's been going on around the state.
I'll just add, we've done similar ordinances up for La Crosse, for Rock County Airport, and that one's really challenging to administer because we have 2 counties and 6 towns and 2 cities. So that one's kind of an administrative nightmare. And then we're doing one right now very similar to yours for Hartford. So it's a format that the Bureau of Aeronautics has seen and is pretty comfortable with this conditional use focus that gives you guys both protection for the airport, but more flexibility for administration.
Awesome.
Like the town of Okaimai been brought in on any of this?
Yeah, they were invited to the public informational meeting back in
Yeah.
October. I don't believe anybody showed up from
I
there.
don't think so.
No, the nice thing with Black Wolf and Academy is a lot of property that was presently in is coming out that's within their jurisdictions. So this update removes town and county property and actually adds city property in the regulation. So it's overall, I think, a benefit from that perspective.
Yeah, majority of most of the impact is actually
North.
On the north
north
side.
in in the city of Oshkosh itself, so it actually decreases the amount of area in the town area and increases the amount of area in the city area. So
Most in those areas, town areas, it's usually the height limitation that is an issue. And this new ordinance actually is not so rigid with the height, applying blanket heights for large tracts of land. They had to get more specific,
yeah,
which is becomes less restrictive just because of that.
Yeah, and speaking of the height restrictions, for those that weren't at the other meetings, that's above sea level. And the airport just sits at, I believe, 808 feet above sea level. But it also depends on the contours of the land. So that's how far above sea level when they come up with those numbers, when you're looking at them. And remember, basically, you're starting approximately around 800, depending on the topographic area of the region. It could be significantly shorter building or taller building. So just something to think about in there as well.
I think this, and because I'm a townsperson, I'm gonna say this is probably one of the first times I've seen the city, the airport, the county, all working to protect the towns, villages, the city, and as you said, it goes north of 20th. The city has been more of a great player in this. The airport is what we're trying to protect under the master plan, and yet we have county townships that I'm saying we got to protect Black Wolf, but you still have the possibility of being able to do something through the conditional use. I don't think anything's going to get out of the realm of things, but we are protecting our airport. But yet we're going to go through a lot of players in this. I feel pretty confident this will all work.
Yes, this is a very good job by everybody involved with that.
It took us 3 years.
With that area that's gonna be in the city north of the airport. Population density of area,
So it's all established single-family residential already.
okay,
I don't know the density off the top of my head. Most of that in the C is what we call our SR5 zoning, so it's typically 5 units per acre.
okay. And I'm assuming we wouldn't allow any apartment buildings in that district
So
or,
the current code and the proposed update both do, but it caps the density of apartments, and I don't know the number off the top of my head of what it is.
Okay.
It's like 12 units per acre, somewhere in that line. Both current and proposed that is maintained. That you can do a small single apartment building of a couple of units, but you can't build a large building.
okay,
Yeah, the old code stopping at 20th, when we started looking at it with the consultant in the airport, there's no rhyme or reason. When it got adopted back in 2012, it just stopped. All logic and metrics from Bureau of Aeronautics and the consultant said, planes don't just stop at 20th, they use that area, and we need to include it to have a better protection for the airport, more accurately show what's actually taking place.
Anything else from anyone?
I think, John, I think the committee, it's up to the committee where, at this point, whether it wants to send this on the count or to public hearing in January.
Well, I'll make a motion to forward this amendment application for chapter 24 to the January public hearing.
a second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll see it in January.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
That's when we chuckle under our breath. All right, we'll move on to item number 3, East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission report on Winnebago County non-metallic mining reclamation program and committee action on East Central Wisconsin
Thanks, Cameron.
Regional Planning Commission 2023 budget and fee. I'm hopeful.
We have Scott Conkle from Central Regional Planning. Scott, and just a little reminder to the committee, this is this particular program is a multi-county, 5-county program. And it's a mandated, state mandated program, as I mentioned in the agenda item report. And Scott is the one at East Central that does all the work for us on this.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you.
Otherwise, it's just gonna be on the screen. We could have them log into Zoom. Or do I have to-
Oh, look at all those
Can
things
you
I
go
subscribe
to our meeting page? Yourself.
Video,
sure.
Disney Plus, Hulu,
Yeah.
Samsung TV. Samsung TV is
Yeah,
actually. impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I use it for
We have to record
most of
it.
the Geo network.
Oh,
Most of the time, the buzzer, I think it is.
Oh,
They have match game on the all the time. They have match game.
Oh, yeah.
Seven.
Yeah. I remember that page.
So risky.
Yeah.
Now, we'd be castrated, ostracized.
Oh, sure.
Have to go up. Winnebago County Planning and Zoning.
Luckily.
I thought we just threw winter and it was St. Patty's Day.
I didn't have. It's just John came over.
Oh, tell him he's got to wait.
Some music from the old country.
Bagpipes. Oh. We're in a meeting.
He probably
He
assumed that
did,
we would have
he
been
did, he
finished.
just did, yeah.
Planning and zoning.
The planning and zoning
Yeah.
meeting.
We're on 3rd floor, you're on 4th, stay put.
He probably didn't understand our agenda had presentations in it.
Yeah, he thought it was 15 minutes long.
She
Yeah.
does a good job. Like I said, she's probably one of the best
That,
presenters and she can answer almost any of the questions.
but and like it was very enlightening. She said, I spent 9 years on your side of the table, which
Yeah.
helps. You can tell.
Yeah, yeah. They should know their audience. Yeah.
But she doesn't speak above you.
No,
She knows her audience.
Maybe she'll run for office someday. Poor girl, I hope not.
well, that's why I wanted to add again about the height thing, because a lot of people don't realize. You're looking, oh my God, 900-foot development. No.
Yeah.
That would be, that would be 100 feet above the airport.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're at the same level where that land is.
Exactly.
If it goes up to 880, you can only do a 20-foot development,
Yeah.
ranch style.
There you go.
It's
Yeah.
on the application. over
Keep
there.
it low.
What's Cameron's last name? Ken?
Halleck, HALLOCK.
Same
Halleck,
thing.
All right.
Jim's on family medical
Do
leave.
you have sign?
Jim should
Oh, yeah,
come
try
in
that
at
one.
8.
Have it
Oh,
issues in
okay.
fine, check.
Scott, you got it done.
And she had- Yeah, so
Put your name in there.
I think
There's more
he's gonna be
pressure
back
here.
for a Wednesday. We have a meeting on Wednesday, the 7th.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something to do.
We're getting our pictures
I
taken
won't
at
be
that
on.
one,
Yeah,
right?
we're getting our pictures.
I
taken.
don't need to be at that.
You don't need to be at that one? You think we can handle it? Okay. Thank you.
Your pictures.
Well, that's after the meeting.
Sure. Yeah, you can start.
I won't be around. I won't be in the county.
Morning, Scott Conkle from East Central Planning. Here to talk about NR 135 every year. I present the program, give you a kind of review of all the sites and the budget, yearly budget. I could actually I'll start out with the sites, the 9 sites we have. So there's 11 by 17s. all permitted sites in the county, just to look at the spreadsheet. County has 43 active mines, 973 active acres, and this one, grown last year. I was able to- And we had some reclamation this year on some sites that I could certify. In this advisor pit, that's over there in the town of Winnebago County, site that really wasn't used much, but finally reclaimed. So I was able to close that site out, and then the Winchester pit, which I'll show you a panel of that site after. I was able to reclaim 6 acres on that site. So the map you see there and correlates with all the sites. And if you have any questions on any of those sites, if you have to answer it. If you have any concerns or interest on. If there's no, I have no non-compliance issues. I was able to get out and inspect 100% of the sites this year, which is really good. We picked up Calumet County this last year. I used to administrate the programs in 2001, 2013. They thought they could use that extra revenue. They ran the program until last year, and they said, "Can we take it back?" So we were able to. It was a good time to renew the contract with the county. So that was a procedure. We just took out a lot of the startup language in 2001, and now Calumet County is back on board with all the sites. The other thing, I can move on to the budget if you don't have any questions on the sites. Starting in that first line on that spreadsheet of the budget, I have 1,464 hours the program in the budget for the next year. My indirect rate on my direct cost is $32 an hour. My indirect cost through our audit has dropped this last year. So that's good. I like to see that. I have a GIS specialist who puts in 70 hours towards my program, and a deputy director that does my reviews on the program. Equipment and supplies, $4,200, and that's for licensing of GIS and some drone software I have and insurance. There's also liability insurance that went up significantly. I really don't understand why it jumped so much, but it is. Mileage, 7,000 miles a year. Publication fees I put in there for 2 new mine sites, and I put $400 for training and conferences. I also collect the fees for the DNR when so the program is self-funded by the operators, and I collect the DNR's portion of the fees in March. When I do my DNR reporting to the DNR, I submit their portion of the fees back to them. And that's $20,000 they get for auditing me. So the total for the budget is $144,977. There's a carryover of the program that we're reducing. That carryover really came from I have over 200 sites. There's a permit review fee that's $705. And as long as I'm showing that number to be reduced every year, and that's within a couple of years, we expect to be running just on a flat budget. But that carryover is reduced dramatically. Last year, we're down to 13,500. Look at what's in the yellow there. It's a carryover. So the remaining amount to meet the budget would be 131,000 minus 2 projected new mine sites a year. So all needed to complete the budget would be 130,000. And so you actually divide that by the number of active acres within all 5 counties. So with the carryover, if you spent the carryover today, the true cost per acre for the operators would be $31.61. The cost would be $31.61. Without a carryover, the cost would be $35 an acre, $35.23. So that last box pretty much summarizes the same thing. The DNR's portion of the fees is $5, East Central is 30. So we don't propose to make any changes to the active acre cost this year, to keep it at 35. Like I said, if we were to actually take that carryover, use it all at one time, even in the past, and then you're fluctuating. Drop it down and then the operator's gonna be really confused. They're gonna be calling, why was it this much this year and now it's this much? So we kind of want to keep it, just nice and flat. So it's been working out well that way. Any questions on the budget?
You did say you physically went to all of these, right?
Yes.
Physically went to all of these.
Yep, this year, and the reason I was able to do that is because I picked up Calumet County. I didn't know what that was gonna look like. So I was very vigilant on my scheduling, getting multiple sites in one day. I was busy.
Yeah.
Thinking, I don't know what this is gonna look like, and I got all these new sites coming back at me. So I intend to do 100% of the sites in the future. It's easier said than done sometimes, in coordination with individuals to meet up with them on the site. Went really well this year.
You need a motion for your budget?
Yeah. Motion.
I make a motion.
Typically, the committee does take action. on that.
I make a motion to approve the budget.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
So is all of your funding then is covered by these fees that you collect? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's all funded by the operators.
Which is why it makes sense that they want a stable cost every year, because then they know how to do their budgets.
Sure. Sure.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Budget passes. Okay, item number 4, review and action to forward town of, I never get this.
Thank
written
you.
He's got
One
something else
second,
here.
guys, I'd like to show you some drone shots real quick. They're really
Awesome.
quick and fast.
Sure.
We're just trying to figure it out on. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Go back to share.
Click on it. Oh, yeah. And now you can go. There you go.
This is, so what I typically do on the sites, I go out and I map these sites. So mapping, you go out there with a drone, it's flying a pattern. And it maps that entire site. And I use that with my GIS application, and I can get, active data. What does it look like today? And it's extremely helpful. The amazing photography. I could see tire tracks. I can identify vehicles. I'm flying at 200 feet. It's amazing. So it's really helped manage the program. Real happy with it. But when I also put it up there, put the drone up there, I put it up a second time and I do a panoramic photo of these sites. What's nice about that is I keep these photos up in a cloud, and I can share that link with the operators. I can share it with the county. And if somebody wants to see what's happening on the site immediately, I could do it right from the field. And this is what that looks like. So I want to show you that Winchester pit I showed you was some reclamation on. This is by Tim Zilja's house right here. His house is back here. This is all basically a field when he had planned this, and it was planned to be a lake. You can see it, he's done a really nice reclamation. And it helps him, it's your own property that you're living at. You're gonna do a good job.
Yeah,
you know.
and you're a landscaper.
So, and you're a landscaper. So that being said, he doesn't have much left. So where he's at right now, he has some reclamation in this area. He's gonna, I can see what he's doing here. He's gonna take out a little more right where I'm moving that mouse, and he's gonna reclaim this in, and he'll probably put some riprap and stuff around there. We can see, it's kind of cool, right?
That's a great, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
cool.
That's quite a property.
That's so cool. It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
So deep, you know?
Oh,
It's just
and I
deep.
assume those are pretty deep. The water's pretty deep.
Yeah, it's,
The sand pits aren't as deep as
Yeah,
the
if that
rock,
was the same.
but
and what I'm showing you here is the Gerke Pit in the town of Rushford. That's also another Zildjian site, but it's kind of an interesting site. He also makes, if you look back here, this is not part of the mine, but he makes compost. So he's into the compost business. That's all these rows you see back here on the outskirts or the edge of the mine. This is also going to be a very beautiful lake when it's done. This will all be lake in here. He mines the sand from below the water table. Got a big high hole right there. There I am, right down here.
no,
He's standing there, and that's where I launch a drone.
Oh.
But now a lake like this has been here for quite a while, but he's gonna finish that lake. I talked to the operators, oh yeah, he lets us fish down here, and it's a fisherman's paradise, you know. It's already loaded full of big perch and bluegills and all that good stuff. But I just wanted to show you some of the things that I can do with the drone. And
Yeah.
so if there's any ever a particular site, you know, I have questions on that and you want to look at it, I'll put my drone up there and I'll send you this, and you can zoom in on anything you want to zoom in on.
That's a lot of land. That's a lot of land in there.
It's interesting.
That's not all of them. If you look at all of them. We have a lot of bits in ours.
Wow.
All right, and then the other thing I wanted to show you is this FLB quarry is almost finished, and that's in the town of Algoma. That's a Michael's quarry, and it's almost complete with the reclamation, but we do have, they do have a potential buyer.
Thank you, log helps, Scott.
Oh, I did. Oh, crap.
Back to the zone.
Right there.
No, I have to go back into the hole.
Oh,
I can do
This-
more otherwise.
well, disregard that. It's a beautiful site, and it's not completely reclaimed yet. There's a little bit they gotta finish up, but they do have a potential buyer. And it's just an amazing, it's probably one of my favorite reclamations, because they actually didn't mine out the whole site. There was more they could have took. But they reclaimed it for development. And this will help me with other operators to say, you know, they left some behind, they did some good planning, so it could be developed. And they just got, you know, how many millions of dollars for this property? You know, in the end, and it's gonna be beautiful. It's a lake with contoured beaches. It's 90 feet deep on one end. They actually blasted some caves in there for divers. They can control the water. There's a waterfall that comes in. It's a screen disconnection that you can't do anymore. But way back when, they disconnected a stream to make that quarry. So the water flows into the quarry. They have an outlet, so they can maintain that water level. So they actually built a ledge on one side of it that's 3 feet of water all the time, where it's 90 feet deep. That if you're a diver, you can just swim up on that ledge, take a rest, go back down again. And it's amazing. A lot of thought went into that.
Wow.
That's the kind of things that I advocate when I get out and talk to these property owners. It's starting to sink in, starting to catch with them. So,
What's being done, like say with Michael's Pit and Albright's? I mean, they're so close, there's a wall between them. Is there anything being done there on 21?
on 21,
If not, it
I
don't
would-
matter.
If they'll get to a point and they'll do a connection possibly, if they can work together. See, that's the whole thing. And they're getting better about that. So at some point, they'll modify that plan, and they'll take stake out and they'll split that stone, you know, because you can survey that in, determine the yard, say you get this much, I get that much.
Don't we do that in
Unfortunately-
Winchester?
What's that?
Did we do that in Winchester? And that's,
Yep.
what's his name? Z
Uh,
Kelly or
You know, you owned it.
Man,
Yeah.
yeah, we had a
I've
we did
known
the
it
same
since I
thing.
had this in my head.
Kelly Wicker.
Kelly Wicker, yeah. So it would be great for Michael's work with the Albrights. But the thing is, there's a property line dispute that's
Right.
holding that whole thing up. You know, you're mining on my land, that's my land.
That's why I was wondering, one of these days they're gonna blast and it's gonna fall one way or the other, and then
Well, it's pretty wide. There's a lot of
Right.
stone in that wall, and I'd love to see it removed, so I kind of keep pushing that. Once a year, come on, guys. Get over your little land dispute here, but that's where it's sitting right now. No attorneys have been involved yet.
Thank you.
You bet. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, now we will move on to item number 4. Review and action to forward town of Nepeuskin text amendment changes to county board.
Okay, the town of Nepeuskin submitted ordinance amendments to our office just to check their procedural practices on the adoption of those. So we received a copy of the adopted zoning ordinance amendments. The amendments are related to solar energy systems, fences, accessory structures, and clarification of existing language. The adopted zoning ordinance amendments for the town of Nepeuskin must be approved by the county board. There does not appear to be any conflicts with county zoning jurisdiction or regulatory authority. Recommendation is to forward adopted zoning ordinance amendments to county board for action.
I just hope it don't say amend the zoning ordinance of the town of Clayton on top.
Does it say that?
Yes. It's right in that packet. It's in the packet though.
The
Okay,
resolution,
thanks.
The big one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thanks, Tom, for moving. We'll get that.
It seems to slip through every so often.
Does NPS can stand for? Native American terms. Must be a name of somebody. You don't know?
Chief ETS is coming.
Chief.
Any discussion on this? Actually, I should say, do we have a
I will make a motion that we move it forward for the town on EPS for the text amendment changes to the county board.
As corrected, right?
Right. As the resolution is corrected.
Okay. I'll second it.
All right, it's been moving second. Now any discussion on it? Figure if there are any issues, we would definitely hear from Tom on this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We have anything else to discuss from staff or? I don't want to close out before giving you the opportunity.
Pretty good.
Anyone ready to make a motion?
Someone.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Means adjourned.